What's the mood in Camp Sunak this morning?
It's not good, but even worse is the mood among Tory MPs, particularly in red wall seats who are facing decimation. So I spoke to a Tory MP for Dudley North this morning, a guy called Marco Longhi, and he sounded a lot like Nigel Farage. He said Labour is on course for an, I quote you, overwhelming win. They're going to win. And he said, I have huge respect for Nigel Farage. And what I'd really like for him to do is to not stand against me in my seat, not put a candidate against me. And when you talk to people privately, they are saying, my big concern is not whether I win or lose. I've lost. It's about whether I finish second or third. And so that is the kind of existential crisis that Tory MPs are facing. And into that mix, you're going to get increasing talk of more defections to reform. People are panicking, is how I'd phrase it.
So could some people who are currently standing as Conservative MPs, could they before election day defect to Reform and stand as a Reform MP?
Yes, there's a handful, there's 4 or 5, and when the run up to Thursday, when the nominations go in, and there are concerns, people are really edgy out there because they see this as they're going to lose their livelihoods, they're going to lose their jobs, they are depressed, and they also quite like Farage, all of them. In this Marco Longhi interview I did, he said, Nigel is a hugely talented politician. He should have been given recognition for what he has delivered over the past couple of decades. So he's not defecting to Reform. He insists that he's going to stay as a Tory, but that as a Tory MP talking about the leader of a party that is setting out to destroy his own party. And he seems very complimentary.
Can you remember a time when it's ever been worse for the Tory party since the end of the war?
Oh, no, I mean, it's clearly, if you look at the polls, it's bad. But then I heard what Steven Swinford was saying a couple of minutes ago about the mood amongst a small number, I think, of Conservative MPs he'd talked to. But this was what I remember hearing from people on the Labour side in the 2017 election, when the Conservatives had, leads of 20% also in the polls going into it. And to my disappointment, in the event, we turned out doing much worse than that. So I don't take the electorate for granted.
Theresa May's lead, which she started the election with, was high, but it quickly disappeared. Keir Starmer's lead is not disappearing; it's as strong as ever.
No, and I've always thought the most difficult challenge for Rishi Sunak in this election is simply going to have been 14 years in office, after which there's inevitable temptation of people to vote for a change, to give the other lot a go. So I think Nigel Farage's decision clearly does make things more difficult for the Conservative Party. Every vote that he and Reform UK get means that in those seats that are very closely fought between the Conservatives and either Labour or the Liberal Democrats, if the Tories lose votes to Reform, it makes it more likely that where the vote is on the cusp already, those seats will tip over to Labour or Lib Dems and weaken the Conservatives in the next Parliament, strengthen Labour gains if that is the case. And that's something that people do need to weigh up when they go to the polling station.
Steve, this isn't business as usual. The Conservatives have been in power for 13 years. When the election came in 1964, Harold Wilson won by only 4 seats. It's worse than 97, after they'd been in power since 79. Even Labour, which had been in power since 97 for 13 years, David Cameron didn't win an overall majority. This is in a completely different league of potential meltdown.
We have never seen a position like this in modern polling history, where a party's been this far behind in the polls and has gone on to win it. And I say that today. That was also the case a month ago. So if anything, it's even worse now. What Rishi Sunak is attempting to pull off is completely unprecedented on a scale that has never happened before. He himself already, before he called the election, said it would require the greatest comeback in political history. Well, we're then some now. He needs even more than that if he's to turn it round. The other thing that Tory MPs are telling me they're picking up on the doorstep is voters quite like some of the policies the Tories are coming up with. Their core vote, they like the national service, they like tax cuts to pensioners on income tax. But they're feeling, the question they're getting asked is, why didn't you do this when you're in power? Why have you waited till now? And that's where the real anger is. Some of the Red Wall Tory MPs are saying, we've been banging on about artificial intelligence while we're in office. We've been talking about Maths 218. These are all laudable things, but we should have been having retail election policies months ago. And to do it now is all a bit late. As Linton Crosby, the Australian strategist behind the 2015 campaign, once put it, you can't fatten the pig on market day.
If it is a disaster for them on July the 4th, should they reach out to Nigel Farage?
No, I think that the one thing I'd agree with Matthew Goodwin on is that a party of the centre-right that wants to be in government has got to broaden its coalition. But that means taking in people on the right, but also taking in people who would define themselves as just right of centre.
But why not? If you're going to take people on the right, why not Nigel Farage? He's the most famous figure on the right.
Because he has been standing candidates against Conservative candidates, encouraging his aim. He declares is the destruction of the Conservative Party. It's very difficult to welcome somebody who's got that track record into the bosom of the party. I think what really worries me is that if you look at the pattern of the polls in the last couple of years, the hemorrhaging of votes from the Conservatives, according to the pollsters, to Labour and the Liberal Democrats. And when I've gone knocking on doors, I am meeting those people who say that they think the Conservative Party has moved far too far to the right. What troubles me about Mr. Farage is both that his rhetoric is divisive, and we saw that again in something he was saying, for example, about British Muslims the other day. And not just that I happen, obviously, to disagree with him fundamentally on the European issue, but when I look at what he did as a leading member of the European Parliament, he had the opportunities there to achieve practical things, to shape legislation at European level in a way that reflected British interests. He didn't turn up half the time. He was on the Fisheries Committee. He was notorious as an absentee.
Right.
I don't think he's credible as a potential leader or potential contributor to an election victory.
If the Conservatives did reach out to Mr. Farage, would you be able to stay in the Conservative Party?
Well, I think I've been a member of the Conservative Party for just short of 50 years at the moment. I think I would find even the strongest ties of loyalty being very stretched.
I mean, I don't see what's going to stop your party being pushed to the populist right now. It's happened in other countries. It's happened to the Republicans in America. It's happened in France, where Le Pen is now the main force on the right. It's happened in Italy, where Meloni is now the prime minister. What would stop it from happening, given that the condition, which Steve's been telling us too, of the Conservative Party? Where else can you go if Mr. Starmer's parked his tanks on the centre ground?
Where the Conservative Party has to go, in government or outside, is to try to build as broad a coalition as possible and to seek in its policies and its language to unite groups in society and not to try to divide them and set one against the other, which is what I fear from Mr. Farage. And I think it is not easy. And it requires attention to what the electorate want. But when I look at how the electorate defines itself, when you look at the polls, you ask people, where do you place yourself on a left-right spectrum? The electorate places itself, broadly speaking, centre or slightly centre-left. And if the Conservative Party wants to be in government and wants to have majorities, then it has to recognise that reality amongst the electorate as a whole. And yes, you want to respect the right wing of the parties. I always have done, but you have to reach out beyond that.
That's the argument, precisely the argument that the Heathites used against Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah,
but Margaret Thatcher in practice was very pragmatic when it came to office.
But that wasn't what people knew in '79 when she won.